They laughed. They laughed like I was the punchline in some cruel family joke. Right there, in the middle of my grandfather's will reading. When the lawyer announced what I was getting, $1, the room erupted in smug chuckles and sideways glances. $1. Not the vintage car I helped him restore. Not the lake house I painted with my own hands. Not even a single trinket from his beloved watch collection. Just a single, lonely dollar. I stared at the paper like the words might rearrange themselves if I blinked hard enough. But then, the lawyer paused. Slowly, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed yellow envelope. Written across the front, in my grandfather's unmistakable shaky handwriting, were the words, "To be given to Alex, and only Alex, after the will is read." The laughter stopped. Their faces changed. And suddenly, the joke wasn't funny anymore. Welcome to Judgy Tales, the channel where hidden truths come to light, and you are the final judge. Here we share real stories packed with betrayal, ethical drama, shocking confessions, and revenge so satisfying you'll want to hit replay. If you live for jaw-dropping twists, real emotions, and the kind of family feuds that leave more scars than Thanksgiving dinners, then you're in the right place. Ear listen. Balance scale judge. Beach balloon share your thoughts. Today's story is a setup so cruel, it felt like a performance. Only it wasn't orchestrated by the dead, but by the greedy living. My family never saw me as one of them. I was always the quiet kid, the black sheep who didn't gossip, didn't suck up, didn't brag about money or inheritance. So when Grandpa passed and we all gathered at the lawyer's office, they knew I'd be left out. And when they heard I got a single dollar, they thought it confirmed everything they already believed, that I didn't matter. But they forgot one thing. My grandfather never did anything without purpose. Every move he made, every decision in his life was part of a bigger plan, like the final pieces of a long strategic chess match. When the lawyer handed me that envelope, I didn't open it right away. I just looked around the room. Their smug faces now filled with confusion, maybe even fear. $1 could be a slap in the face, or a key. A key to something they never saw coming. And let me tell you something. Grandpa knew they would laugh. He counted on it. What do you think was in that envelope? A deed to a secret house. A hidden bank account. Or maybe something more powerful than money. A truth that could ruin them all? Get ready, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story of inheritance. It's the final move of a man who refused to let the greedy write the ending. This is Judgy Tales, and today you decide. Who was betrayed, who was blinded by greed, and who truly won? My name is Alex Carter, and if you looked at my family on paper, you'd think we were close. You'd see Sunday dinners, birthday get-togethers, family vacations to Myrtle Beach, a Thanksgiving turkey carved by Grandpa himself, and smiles for the camera that said we loved each other. But you'd be wrong. Because behind those photos were decades of cold shoulders, subtle insults, and a pecking order that was never officially stated, but always enforced. I was the quiet one, the one who didn't fit. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was never allowed to. I was raised mostly by my single mother, who worked 2 jobs and still somehow made time to raise me right. She was Grandpa's daughter, but she was also the one who married outside the family expectations, as they like to call it. My father, a schoolteacher, good man, humble, honest, but not legacy material, according to the Carters. After the divorce, my mom and I became more like a footnote in family gatherings, invited out of obligation, seated farthest from the head of the table, spoken to only when necessary. The rest of the Carter clan. Picture a Southern Gothic novel dipped in Wall Street arrogance. My Uncle Randall, the eldest son, practically wore his inheritance like cologne. Always in pressed suits, always talking about the family brand, even though he hadn't worked a day in his life. He had 2 kids, my cousins Tyler and Madison, who grew up with custom everything. Monogrammed backpacks in kindergarten, private tennis coaches, and vacations that made my thrift store clothes feel like a crime. Then there was Aunt Brenda, baby of the family, queen of passive-aggressive compliments, and someone who believed her interior design blog gave her real estate expertise. Her daughter, Harper, was an Instagram lifestyle influencer before she even had a driver's license. The kind of girl who made sure everyone knew which brand she was wearing, who sent back food 3 times at restaurants and who'd ask, "What do you even do?" if you didn't own a trust fund. Grandpa was the glue, or at least that's what we told ourselves. He'd been a widower for over 20 years, losing Grandma when I was just 6. I still remember the funeral, not because of the sadness, but because it was the only time I ever saw Grandpa cry. After that he changed. He became harder, quieter, more observant. Some said he became colder. But I think he became strategic. See, Grandpa had built his fortune from scratch. He started with a tiny mechanic shop and ended up owning 3 car dealerships across the state. He was old school, self-made, proud. And while he never said it outright, I always had the feeling he resented how the family turned out. More obsessed with wealth than work, more concerned with appearances than people. Despite all that, Grandpa and I had a quiet bond. While the others fought over who got to ride in his Jaguar or who would inherit the lake house, I was the one who mowed his lawn in the summer, fixed his Wi-Fi when he couldn't get Netflix to work, and spent evenings with him watching old westerns while he drank tea with 2 sugars. He didn't talk much, but when he did, he said things that stuck. Things like, "The ones who laugh first usually cry last," and "Money reveals more than it hides." I think he liked that I didn't ask for anything. That I wasn't impressed by money. I never pushed for approval, but I think I earned his respect anyway. Still, I never expected much from the will. I assumed everything would go to Randall and Brenda's side of the family. That's how it always worked. In their eyes, I wasn't a real Carter anyway. But I showed up to the reading because I wanted closure. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to hear Grandpa's last words and walk away with peace. The setting for the will reading was as cold and clinical as you'd expect. A polished conference room in a downtown law office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, leather chairs, a massive table that looked more like it belonged in a corporate boardroom than a place to process grief. The lawyer, Mr. Abramson, had been Grandpa's attorney for over a decade. He was tall, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of voice that sounded like he'd seen too many family implosions to be fazed by anything. Everyone else arrived like they were attending a board meeting. Randall in his Rolex and navy pinstripe. Brenda in oversized sunglasses, despite being indoors. Tyler and Madison scrolling on their phones. Harper recording snippets for her Instagram story, whispering things like, "Manifesting generational wealth vibes today." I sat quietly at the far end, not part of the huddle, not included in the whispered speculations, just watching. When the will reading began, it was exactly as expected. Randall inherited the lake house, plus a significant stake in the dealership business. Brenda received a cash endowment and Grandpa's antique car collection. Tyler and Madison each got trust funds to be unlocked at age 30, which earned a groan from both of them, as if turning 30 was some unimaginable punishment. Harper got a property in downtown Savannah, which she immediately started Googling on Zillow. Then it was my turn. Mr. Abramson looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. He cleared his throat and said flatly, "To my grandson Alex Carter, I leave $1. There was a pause, a full second of silence, then came the laughter. Harper choked on her iced coffee. Madison elbowed Tyler and muttered something about the spare change fund. Randall smirked. Brenda let out a low chuckle and muttered, "Well, that says it all." I didn't flinch. I didn't laugh. I didn't say a word. My heart sank a little, not because I cared about the money, but because even in death it seemed like Grandpa had pushed me aside. But that's when it happened. Mr. Abramson raised a hand to quiet the room. His expression shifted, just slightly, from professional neutrality to something else. Anticipation. Amusement. "There is one more item," he said, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out a yellow envelope, aged, sealed with wax and marked in thick black ink, to be opened by Alex Carter only after the will is read in full. The room went dead silent. He handed it to me. Every eye followed it from his hand to mine. I could feel the atmosphere shift. The laughter stopped, not because they cared about what was in it, but because they suddenly weren't in control. This was something they hadn't anticipated, something not in their script. I didn't open it right away. I just held it in my hand, feeling its weight. Not just physical but emotional, symbolic, intentional. In that moment, a dozen thoughts raced through my mind. Was this Grandpa's final insult? Or was it something else? A message? A confession? A secret? As I looked around that room, the smug faces now laced with curiosity and subtle fear, I knew one thing for certain. This story wasn't over. Not yet. And what came next would change everything they thought they knew. Not just about the will, not just about Grandpa, but about the lies they built their lives around. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It doesn't invite reflection or comfort. It wraps around the room like a thick fog made of tension and suspicion. That's the silence that fell the moment I took the envelope in my hand. It wasn't heavy, just a single sheet of paper inside, maybe two. But in a room full of people who thought they'd won, it might as well have been a ticking time bomb. I didn't open it immediately. I just sat there, letting it rest on the table, and suddenly I was the center of attention. The same family who ignored me for years, who treated me like the uninvited outsider, now couldn't stop looking at me. Watching, waiting, wondering. Tyler, always the bold one, leaned forward and said, "What's in it?" "Another $1. Got a few weak laughs. The kind of nervous laughter you hear when people are pretending they're still in control. I met his gaze and replied calmly, "I'll read it in private." That didn't go over well. Brenda immediately scoffed. "Oh, come on. You're making this dramatic now. What could possibly be in that envelope that Grandpa didn't put in the will?" Randall added, "If there's something the rest of the family needs to know, it should be said now. We don't need any more games." I could tell it was killing them not to know. Because they were used to being in the know, used to holding the power, the titles, the assets. And now, a sealed envelope they weren't allowed to open was suddenly more valuable than all the real estate and stock options they'd just inherited. Mr. Abramson stepped in. "Mr. Carter," he nodded toward me, "is within his full legal right to review the document privately. It was a personal addendum, not part of the probated will." The word personal seemed to twist something inside them. Harper folded her arms. "I bet it's just a letter saying how sorry Grandpa was for cutting you out." That stung, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But I stayed quiet. Because deep down, I already knew what they didn't. Grandpa never acted without intention. This wasn't random. This wasn't symbolic. This envelope meant something. And they could feel it. After the reading adjourned, I left the law office, envelope still sealed, and drove to the one place that ever felt like mine, Grandpa's old shed behind his house. It was falling apart, surrounded by overgrown grass and rusting garden tools, but I'd helped him fix it up one summer when I was 15. Inside, it still smelled like sawdust and machine oil. It was quiet, private. That's where I opened it. Inside was a single handwritten letter, on thick parchment paper, folded in thirds. Grandpa's handwriting was firm, deliberate, but older now, clearly written in his final months. At the top it simply said, "Alex, this is for you. Because you were always paying attention." I read every word, and with each sentence, the air in that shed seemed to get heavier. He explained that the $1 was a ruse, a distraction. Something to trigger exactly the kind of reaction he'd come to expect from his legacy-hungry children and grandchildren. The real inheritance, he wrote, wasn't in the will. It was hidden, literally. And only I knew the place well enough to find it. He'd buried it in the foundation of the shed. A small fireproof box, cemented beneath the floorboards we'd laid together a decade ago. That summer I thought we were just replacing warped wood and weatherproofing a roof. But Grandpa had a plan even back then. He left instructions on how to find the exact tile, how to lift it without damaging the structure, and where to break the concrete cleanly. I followed his directions to the letter. It took me the better part of the night. Digging, chipping, prying, sweating. But there it was. A black steel lockbox about the size of a shoebox, sealed tight. Inside, documents, photos, a USB drive, and a notarized letter, one that was not meant for my eyes alone. This one was addressed to Mr. Abramson, the family lawyer. Grandpa had crafted a plan that circumvented the will entirely, and he trusted me to deliver it. The next day I returned to the law office. Mr. Abramson's expression shifted the moment I handed him the envelope. "He really did it," he whispered almost to himself. "He really went through with it." Then he looked up at me. "Do you know what this means?" I didn't. Not fully. But I was about to find out. What followed over the next few days unraveled every lie, every hidden truth, and every carefully guarded secret the Carter family had spent years protecting. Because inside that lockbox wasn't money, it was leverage. The documents included ownership papers, real estate deeds, business shares, offshore accounts that had been quietly moved under shell companies years prior. But the kicker: Grandpa had quietly dissolved the trust that fed Randall's business empire. And he'd created a new trust, one that bypassed his children entirely. The beneficiary, me. The USB drive held audio recordings, conversations between Grandpa and his children. The kind of conversations people don't think will ever see daylight. Brenda pressuring him to move into a care facility so they could sell his house. Randall trying to manipulate stock transfers while Grandpa was in the hospital. Harper talking about how she'd redesign everything once he was finally gone. Each recording was date-stamped, archived, and clearly labeled. But it wasn't just about catching them being cruel. It was about proving they never cared. That every hug was fake, every visit was timed around the trust fund calendar, and every promise came with a price tag. The next time we met as a family, it wasn't in a cozy living room. It was back in that sterile conference room, where Mr. Abramson announced that new legal action was being taken. Harper gasped. Brenda demanded an explanation. Randall threatened lawsuits. But Mr. Abramson calmly laid it all out. Grandpa had created a silent inheritance, a living trust that superseded the will in court, and because it was funded and executed before his death, it was legally unchallengeable. Everything they thought they'd inherited, temporarily frozen, investigated, contested. And me. I wasn't laughing. I wasn't angry. I just sat there, watching them fall apart, realizing that the one person they underestimated was the only one who had the power to destroy their illusion. They didn't understand what happened. But I did. They mocked the $1 inheritance because they believed that value was measured in what you're given, not in what you earn or in the truth that lives behind the paper. But Grandpa understood something else. He knew that giving them everything would feed their delusion. Giving them nothing would expose it. And giving me the key. That was the real inheritance. The storm didn't come all at once. It started slow, like a whisper behind closed doors, a shift in the air that no one could quite place, but everyone could feel. That quiet unraveling began when the Carter family received the first legal notice. A temporary freeze on all transferred assets related to the estate of William Carter Sr., pending new documentation provided by the family attorney. And while Randall, Brenda, and the grandchildren may have rolled their eyes at first, assuming it was just another clerical delay, what came next wasn't just a delay. It was detonation. The twist didn't strike like lightning. It hit like controlled demolition. Every brick of their entitled empire pulled out, one carefully placed wire at a time, until the entire structure came crashing down. And I wasn't just watching it happen. I was the one holding the detonator. 3 days after I delivered the contents of the hidden lockbox to Mr. Abramson, he called an emergency meeting at the law office. This time, no one dressed like it was a coronation. Randall's tie was crooked. Brenda wore no makeup. Harper arrived late, uncharacteristically quiet, and without her phone in hand. They knew something was off. But they didn't know just how far Grandpa had gone. We sat in the same conference room as before, except now the air was different. Less smugness, more sweat. Mr. Abramson sat at the head of the table, a thick stack of new documents in front of him. His voice, always measured, held a gravity that made the room feel smaller. "As you're all aware," he began, The will of Mr. William Carter was executed legally and publicly, but there was a separate entity established in advance, a living trust, that carries full legal standing and, as of this week, supersedes the disbursements in the original will. Randall blinked. "You're saying the will doesn't matter?" "The will still stands," Abramson replied, "but the trust now controls the bulk of Mr. Carter's assets. Those properties, accounts, and shares listed in the will. They were no longer in his name at the time of his death. They had already been moved." Brenda was the first to break. "That's not possible. He would have told us." Abramson opened the folder and began listing items. The lake house was transferred to a private holding company 4 months before his passing. The car dealerships, 3 of them, were sold to a silent buyer with the proceeds wired into a new fiduciary account. The Savannah property was never actually owned by Mr. Carter after 2021. All remaining personal and financial assets were placed into a revocable trust under a designated executor. "And who the hell is the executor?" Randall snapped. Abramson didn't flinch. "Alex Carter." The room fell dead silent. "Excuse me," Harper said, eyes wide with disbelief. "Him?" "I'm afraid so," Abramson said calmly. Mr. Carter gave explicit instructions that Alex Carter be the sole executor of the Carter Legacy Trust. The terms of that trust include full discretion over asset distribution, charitable allocations, liquidation, and preservation of records. Brenda's voice cracked. No, he wouldn't do that. Not after everything we've done for him." Randall leaned forward, teeth gritted. "He was dying. He wasn't in his right mind. You know that." Abramson shook his head. "There are 4 independent psychological evaluations, all signed within the past year, verifying that Mr. Carter was of sound mind and judgment at the time of all decisions made. These evaluations were conducted before and after the trust was amended. That was when I spoke." "He knew," I said, locking eyes with Randall. "He knew what you all were planning. The late-night visits. The push to get him into assisted living. The way you pressured the nurses to give you access to his meds." Randall stood. "Don't you dare accuse me." "But I didn't stop. The recordings prove it. You threatened to have him declared incompetent so you could take over everything. He recorded every meeting, every call, even the one where you tried to bribe his doctor." Abramson held up a USB stick. "All conversations have been archived and submitted to our legal office. We are currently in the process of validating claims of elder manipulation and undue influence." Harper's voice was barely a whisper. "You're making this up. Grandpa loved us." "Maybe once," I said, "but not after he saw what you became. They didn't recognize me anymore. Not because I had changed, but because they had never bothered to know me in the first place. I was the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, the one who got a single dollar. But Grandpa had planned everything with terrifying precision. That dollar, it wasn't a slap in the face. It was a diversion, signal, test, and they failed it. But the real twist hadn't hit yet. Because then Mr. Abramson opened the final folder, a manila envelope marked Legacy Conditions. "This," he said, "is where things take a turn." Everyone leaned in. Mr. Carter placed several conditions in the trust that affect your access to any future distributions. These conditions were based not only on behavior, but on integrity. He read them aloud. To Brenda, you must provide verifiable proof of independent income over the next 12 months. No brand deals, no spousal alimony, no inheritance funds. Until then, all access to the trust is frozen. To Randall, you are permanently removed from all business management related to Carter dealerships. Furthermore, due to your attempt to forge a financial transfer document, recorded via audio, you are being referred for criminal investigation. To Tyler and Madison, your trust funds will remain sealed until you complete 1,000 hours of community service each, verified by an external nonprofit. Any attempts to falsify hours will result in permanent revocation. To Harper, your Savannah property is placed into a land trust for transitional housing for women. You may apply for a position as a resident advisor. Or find alternative housing. The room was imploding. Brenda sobbed. Randall yelled. Tyler stormed out. Madison accused me of brainwashing Grandpa. Harper looked like she had been physically slapped. The dynasty they had planned, the control they thought was guaranteed, was dissolving right in front of them. And then Abramson read the last line. Alex Carter is granted full executor authority to determine any additional releases, redemptions, or modifications of the trust, including a clause permitting the creation of a permanent foundation in his name should he choose to decline any personal inheritance. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat back, took a breath, and for the first time in years felt seen. They mocked me for the dollar. But Grandpa gave me everything that mattered. His truth, his trust, and the power to protect his legacy from the people who only wanted to strip it for parts. And that was only the beginning. Revenge. That word gets thrown around a lot. People think of it as fire, fury, shouting matches, and slammed doors. But real revenge, the kind that lingers, the kind you don't walk away from unchanged, isn't loud, slow, precise, surgical. And when it lands, it doesn't just scorch the surface. It rewrites the ground your enemies walk on. That's what Grandpa gave me. In the weeks after the trust bombshell dropped, the Carter family scattered like ants under a magnifying glass. Brenda tried to recover her image, reaching out to news outlets and claiming she was unjustly cut out by a mentally compromised old man. Unfortunately for her, the press found the recordings before they found her. Audio of her threatening Grandpa's caretaker, calling him a burden, and making jokes about sedating him went viral on a local podcast that thrived on scandal. By the end of the month, her design blog lost its brand sponsorships. Half her followers turned on her. The other half just vanished. Her carefully curated world of cream-colored kitchens and curated life hacks crumbled into silence. Randall didn't go down as quietly. He fought. He threatened to sue the estate, sue me, sue the trust, sue the bank. But paperwork doesn't lie, and neither do lawyers who've been preparing for this exact fight. The forged stock transfer document he tried to slide past Grandpa while he was in the hospital, that alone was enough for the state to open an investigation into financial fraud. A quiet deal was struck, no jail time but full removal from every board he sat on. His name scrubbed from all dealership signage. His legacy reduced to a footnote in the brand he once claimed to own. Harper couldn't comprehend it. Her property had been converted into transitional housing, and the trust offered her a dignified out. Apply to stay as a live-in counselor or leave. She refused, of course. Posted a tearful video in front of the gate with captions like, "I've been robbed by my own blood," and "Justice for real heirs." But what she didn't mention was that her modeling contracts were drying up fast. A few old tweets resurfaced, elitist comments, jokes about poverty, and one disastrous post mocking people who work retail. The non-profit now living in her old penthouse responded with grace. "We pray she finds peace outside these walls." Brutal, quiet, final. Tyler and Madison, entitled from birth and suddenly faced with the concept of earning, didn't even make it through the first 100 hours of community service. Tyler tried to forge a letter from a charity and got banned from further participation. Madison, assigned to a community kitchen, posted a video making fun of homeless clients. The trust revoked their inheritance entirely. No second chances. Grandpa had warned them. Entitlement without accountability leads to emptiness. But here's the thing no one expected. Not even me. I didn't keep a dime. As the executor, I had full discretion. I could have cashed in the properties, lived off the assets, turned the Carter name into my personal empire. But when I looked over everything, the estate, the bank accounts, the press swirling like sharks, I heard Grandpa's voice again in my head. It's not about the money. It's about what survives you. So I made a decision. The Carter Legacy Trust was officially converted into a non-profit foundation in Grandpa's name. Its mission: supporting small business grants, funding vocational education, and providing emergency aid to the elderly, especially those with no family left to advocate for them. The lake house became a retreat for caregivers. The dealerships were sold, and the profits seeded a loan program for first-generation entrepreneurs. The Savannah property. The women who moved and transformed it into a safe space, one that didn't just house survivors but gave them purpose. One of them, Rosa, wrote me a letter. She said, "I used to live in fear. Now I live in your cousin's old bedroom. And every time I wake up, I remember that I am worthy." That letter meant more to me than every asset combined. As for me, I took only what I needed. A modest apartment, Grandpa's old toolbox, and the battered wristwatch he always wore when we fixed up the shed together. That, and the peace of knowing I did right by the man who raised me quietly, loved me silently, and trusted me completely. But it wasn't over just yet. One afternoon Brenda showed up at my door. No cameras, no press. Just her, makeup-free, eyes sunken, holding a crumpled envelope. "I need to talk," she said. I let her in. She sat at my tiny kitchen table, looked around at the chipped countertops and second-hand furniture, and said, "This is what you chose." He nodded. "It's enough." She swallowed hard. I didn't know what we were becoming. I thought he'd never actually cut us off. "That's the problem," I said. "You thought he was bluffing. You all did." She stared at her hands. "You could have destroyed us." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't have to. You did that yourselves." She handed me the envelope. It was a letter Grandpa had written to her. One of many, apparently. Hidden in boxes she'd ignored. In it, he told her the truth. That he had loved her, but didn't respect her choices. That he hoped, even after everything, she'd learn something from this. Brenda cried. Not performative tears. Not dramatic wailing. Just a woman who finally saw herself through the eyes of someone who had stopped waiting for her to change. I didn't hug her. I didn't scold her. I just let the silence speak. Because some lessons echo louder when no one says a word. In the end, I think they all learned something. Not overnight. Not completely. But in small cracks that let light in. Randall started volunteering, quietly, without posting about it. Harper went offline for good. Tyler disappeared from social media altogether. And Madison. He sent me a photo. It was her, in a shelter kitchen, actually cooking. No filters. No captions. Just her hands holding a ladle. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't about taking everything from someone. It's about showing them what they never deserved in the first place. And giving the world something better with what they wasted. Sometimes, the loudest legacy isn't written into a will. It's whispered into the quiet spaces between actions. It's in the care someone gives you when no one else is watching. In the way they remember your favorite tea. In the way they trust you not because of what you say but because of who you are when you think no one's paying attention. That was my grandfather. He never raised his voice. Never boasted. Never tried to prove anything. And yet, in the end, he was the one who had the final word. Not because he had power but because he understood people better than they understood themselves. For most of my life, I thought I didn't matter to my family. I thought I was invisible. And maybe to them I was. But not to him. He saw me. And what he gave me wasn't just control over an estate or a pile of money. It was clarity. Freedom. The opportunity to see every person in that family for who they really were when the mask of inheritance was stripped away. The dollar he left me wasn't an insult. It was a key. One I didn't know I needed, until I held it. There's something cruelly revealing about the reading of a will. It has a way of turning the abstract into the absolute. It doesn't matter what anyone said about love, or loyalty, or respect. What matters is what's written, what's chosen, what's left. And in that single moment, when $1 echoed through the conference room, my family laughed because they thought that moment proved they'd won. What they didn't realize was that it proved just how lost they truly were. They spent years playing the game of wealth. Competing for Grandpa's attention. Flattering him when it was convenient. Manipulating when it wasn't. They fought each other in whispers, in backroom deals, in hollow promises and silent betrayals. And in doing so, they became what he despised the most. People who measured worth by inheritance, not by integrity. But here's the thing about greed, it's loud. It draws attention to itself, demands applause, expects reward. Humility, on the other hand, is quiet. And that's why it often goes unnoticed. Until the moment it's needed the most. In the days that followed the trust reveal, I watched as each member of my family came to terms with who they really were. Some resisted, some lashed out, but some paused, reflected, changed. And that's what stuck with me. Not their outrage, not their tantrums, but those moments of stillness where truth finally took root. Because, let's be honest, inheritance doesn't corrupt people. It exposes them. It shows you exactly what was always there. Hidden behind politeness and pretending. It shows you who believes love is earned, and who believes love is owed. Grandpa's final gift wasn't the control he gave me. It was the burden he spared me. He knew what it would cost to confront that room, to hear them laugh at me, mock me, dismiss me. He knew the weight that would settle on my shoulders when the truth came to light. And still he trusted me with it. Not because I was the smartest, not because I was the most successful, but because I had been present, 'cause I listened, because when no one else saw him as a man, just a wallet in human form, I still saw my grandfather. And now, when people ask me what I inherited, I tell them the truth. I inherited peace. Not because I won, not because I took something from anyone else, but because I let go of expectations, of resentment, of the need to prove myself to people who never intended to understand me. That's the real revenge, isn't it? Living in a way they never expected. Not bitter, not broken, but full, whole, quietly victorious. I've thought a lot about legacy lately. What we leave behind, what it means to matter. Grandpa could have left his money to anyone, could have split it evenly, could have avoided conflict, but he didn't, because he knew that playing it safe would have meant letting history repeat itself. He wanted change. Not in policy but in principle. He wanted to reward character, not connection. And so, he gave me the choice, to keep the wealth, or to turn it into something larger than both of us. Chose the latter. 'Cause money fades, property crumbles, stocks crash, but purpose, that lingers. That passes from one person to another like a torch in the dark. Today, there's a mechanic shop in our town with new equipment, funded by the trust. There's a group of single moms living in dignity in a space my cousin used to call home. There are students learning a trade without going into debt. And there's a quiet little office, modest, tucked away, where I sit and help guide it all without fanfare, without a last name that ever meant anything to anyone outside of our bitter little family. But inside those walls means everything. Carter doesn't mean power anymore. Means service. I still keep the dollar framed in my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how low people will go for more, of how loud their greed can be, of how much power one quiet voice can carry when everything else has collapsed. And sometimes, when the work gets heavy, when I wonder whether any of this truly matters, I look at that frame and remember. They mocked my dollar. But the envelope, that was the real inheritance. If you ever feel like the overlooked one, the background character in your own story, the person who gets passed over, underestimated, or mocked, just know this. You might be the one holding the envelope. And the day you open it might just be the day everything changes. If this story made you stop and think, even for just a moment, then it's already done what it was meant to do. Because stories like this aren't just about drama, or betrayal, or revenge. They're about perspective. About the quiet power of doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. About how truth always finds a way, even if it starts with just $1 and a sealed envelope. And if you felt something here, anger, satisfaction, maybe even a sense of justice, then don't let it end when the video does. Help us keep these stories alive. Tap that like button to show you believe in more than just money, you believe in meaning. Hit subscribe to join a growing community of people who listen, judge, and share their truth. And don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss the next twist, the next judgment, or the next lesson from the chaos of real life. At Judgy Tales, we bring you raw, real, and unapologetic stories every week. From entitled relatives and toxic relationships to shocking confessions and justice served cold, we're not just telling stories. We're pulling back the curtain on the messiest parts of life and asking, what would you do? So if this story spoke to you even a little, don't scroll away. Ear listen. Balance scale judge. Speech balloon and let your voice be part of the next tale. This is Judgy Tales. Real stories. Real drama. Real judgments. We'll see you in the next one.